Welcome back to the Analog Renaissance. In this video, we're going to do our second attempt of a modified contour of a still life. If you remember, this is a snapshot from our last video where I was struggling with this ceramic vase. And right there, I'm drawing an elevation, like a front view of just the vase as my brain was interpreting it, that it had this bulbous shape, it sat on a plinth, and then the stripes across it. And I was trying to determine if that preconception of the shape is what was causing me to have such difficulty drawing it. And I am now going to start working on this new still life where I replaced that vessel with a jar. I believe this jar held dill relish, and it was a nice proportioned size compared to everything else I've been drawing. And so I am going to do a modified contour drawing of these three objects. Notice the placement. There's a glass jar, my candlestick that you are familiar with, and the vase, this time separated from the two other objects. I start this off with a few erasures here and there, really trying to prevent myself from doing that, but this is a modified contour drawing. So you are looking back and forth between the object and your paper. You'll notice, if you've been following along with me, I seem to have some confidence in not doing a lot of sketchy strokes along the contours of the perimeter of the jar. Does change as this video goes on, and this video is being played at real time. No increase in speed, and it took about 16 minutes to draw this whole thing. So the painstakingly slow, I don't think I adhered to. And it might make a difference when we see the end. There are some pieces of this drawing that probably could have been improved. But in general, the practice and the speed with which this work was done, I think was in line with what was achieved. So the jar was drawn first, and since it was see-through, the contour of the jar and the candle did not, I ignored the candle going through the jar because the jar is in the foreground. So it is, the contour of the jar is full. It is not impeded or closed off from the candle. Building in the interior line work. This is the thread along the jar's top. Notice some of those sketchy lines are coming back in here. And I remember while working on this that similar to the vessel, I have this preconceived notion of symmetry on these objects. Even though they are at a different angle to me, I expect them to look symmetrical, meaning each side is equal and similar to one another. In this case, however, because they are at a distance to me, I was at an angle to them, there are slight differences based on my vantage point. And here I started on the far side of the candle, and you're going to see I pull back and slow myself down, and I actually I'll be reworking the top of the jar. I'm thinking, I don't quite remember why I had this change other than I think proportionally things weren't lining up as I expected. So you see me coming back and reworking the top of the jar. And now I'm coming back to work on the candle. If you've been following along, you will know that I've been struggling to keep my drawing on a page. So I think proportionally, I knew I was drawing out of proportion that would lead me to heading off the page. And I was trying to align things back to their reference in relation to the jar. So now this looks much more in line with the placement of that first protrusion on the candlestick holder and the jar's relationship. And I am working the side contour of the candlestick. So I work my way up to the top and continue to do the perimeter of the object. Now, even though the picture is close to my vantage point, it is not 100% perfect. So keep that in mind if you're comparing and contrasting the two. It's not a perfect alignment. As I'm watching this back, the top of the jar and the top of the candlestick look very similar in size in my drawing and not similar in size at all in the photograph. So I'm taking some notes on things to improve as I continue through this series. And I encourage you to do the same. One thing I'm finding is talking while I'm doing these or documenting in some way, either notes afterwards, things I've learned, or things that I witnessed as I was working on these, start to really help frame ways to visualize improving and working towards a better breakdown. In this area particularly, I think they look like they are no longer symmetrical. And it's because of the viewpoint I had of that band around the candlestick holder. And it becomes evident as I start filling in the detail on the candlestick. So now I'm going to work in the internal detail of the candlestick holder. Again, every time I'm doing those details, it's like these sketchy lines come out of me instead of the more confident peripheral lines. And it could be because there are these arches going back and forth across the surface. As this band starts to fill in, you can start to understand the shape difference from one side to the other. So again, trusting the process and learning to trust your eye. When you know something is symmetrical, naturally you know it's symmetrical, but you are drawing it and it turns out to not be symmetrical from the vantage point of your view. It's important to, again, trust that process and trust your instinct. I will say the base of the candlestick does look like it's melting a little the way I've drawn it. So that's an interesting observation. And now onto the vase that I've drawn a number of times in different orientations. For some reason, I'm able to relieve myself of the preconception of this shape while I struggle with doing the same for the others. And this is about where we wrap up, just getting some of the glare contours of the light hitting the vase, which helps the shape helps articulate the shape a little bit more. And this is I think this would be my third or fourth attempt at a modified contour drawing. Not too bad. The base could definitely use some help, but I thank you for following along, and I encourage you to come back for the next iteration where I focus on the soft nature of a slouchy leather bag.